Larsen Toubro chairman SN Subrahmanyan's remarks have triggered off a storm. He's spoken about including 90-hour work weeks and a working Sunday. He's attracted criticism across the spectrum from Deepika Padukone, Goenka and Jwala Gutta. Now attention has been drawn, of course, to the chairman's 51 crore annual salary. That's a whopping 535 times more than the average Indian employee. But he's not the first corporate honcho to promote long working hours. Infosys CEO Narayana, Murthy, Shaadi.com CEO Anupam Mittal, Ola CEO Bhavish Aggarwal, and even Tesla and SpaceX CEO Elon Musk have all been batting for an 80-hour plus work week. Joining me to talk about this is my colleague Kartik Malhotra, Lloyd Mathias. Gentlemen, welcome to the News9 Plus show. Kartik, what's going on? The boundaries are being pushed. Narayana Murthy comes up with 70 and SNS says, no, it's 90. 90 is the new 70.
See, whatever is going on, Sandeep, is not right. I think one can very clearly understand that, at the end of the day, are corporate bosses expected to be slave drivers?
Yes.
Do we have a culture of giving comp off? Do we have a culture of overtime payments? And do we have a culture of, in any case, Indians drawing enough salary to be able to have enough domestic help and have enough other avenues open, which can take care of all the other needs that you as a human being, as a citizen need to take care of when you are at work, back at your house. So I think the race for 70 hours, 80 hours, 84 hours, 90 hours, eventually it boils down to one fundamental question, and that question is that corporate bosses are slave drivers, and there is no denying that at the end of the day, that Lala mentality from Indian bosses is not going away, and that is the unfortunate reality that we are living in
the Lala
today.
mentality, and this is not the Lala land mentality, but this is the Indian corporate mentality that Kartik's referring to. But Lloyd, Indian CEOs, Indian corporate honchos turning slave drivers, what's the reason for this?
Hey, thanks, Sandeep. I think this is a bit of a generalization, though it's definitely disconcerting that a large corporation like L&T chief manages to say this thing. My point is that this type of recommendation of working for nation building or company building is bunkum and makes absolutely no sense. Right? I think large CEOs have to recognize there's life outside of work. More importantly, research shows that increasing work hours beyond a point, and that number is definitely well below the 90 that Mr. Subrahmanyan has talked about, it reduces productivity substantially, it impairs concentration, it results in burnout, it results in unhealthy lifestyles. I think it's very clear that what everyone needs to do is focus on output, not hours.
Absolutely.
And the second aspect is that it is absolutely good and normal for people to have a life outside of work. Time for family, time for kids, time for friends, times for hobbies and interests, and indeed even time for learning, for reading, for upskilling, right? That's what gets an employee to do his best at work.
Right, absolutely.
I think the one disturbing aspect I want to also highlight about his comment was a rather misogynistic part when he says that what will you do if you're not at work, right? Stare at your wife. I think it reflects a deeply misogynistic thinking. Are we assuming, therefore, that women are not going to be part of the workforce? Or, and I mean, there's data to prove, Sandeep, that world over companies have lifted themselves out of the low income into the middle income when there is massive participation of women in the workforce. And this kind of statement by a prominent CEO of a top 10 Indian company, I think is deeply, deeply disturbing.
Disturbing.
And the fact that the PR team has gone out of its way now to defend this, I think in my mind comes as an additional wallop. So I think overall this is despicable and absolutely shocking.
Absolutely shocking. But Kartik, but as Lloyd mentioned, the fact that do long hours really matter? As long as the work is done, it doesn't really matter whether you work 90 hours or 100 hours. You could probably get that job done in 30 or 40 hours.
You're right, Sandeep. I think, this debate on efficiency versus number of hours spent in office, inside office, checking in, checking out, the number of hours you're spending, and out of that, some companies even have this bad habit of calculating how many coffee breaks you've taken, how many loo breaks you've taken, how much time you're spending at lunch. I think all of this put together just talks about a mindset of companies really being focused on the letter and the contract and what you're obligated to do in terms of the time you're spending in office as opposed to the output. What are you really generating with whatever time you're spending in office? I mean, there were cases, I remember back in, 20 years back or so, when I had started my career, that there were IT companies at that time and BPOs which were flourishing at that time, where the idea was that employees would actually spend more number of hours in office beyond their shift to actually have their coffee, enjoy an air-conditioned environment, and clock in more hours when there was an overtime available to them.
Yes.
But beyond a point, I think IT companies understood, BPOs, KPOs at that time understood that there have to be targets, and those targets have to be met. How you meet those targets? Managers need to be given that flexibility, employees need to be given that flexibility, and I genuinely believe that as long as you enjoy the workplace, you enjoy the environment you're coming to, you have a rapport with your boss has a rapport with you, with the team, work will get done. But if you put a gun to somebody's head and say, hey, I need you to do 9 hours a day, or I need you to do 12 hours a day, and flouting all sort of labor laws, which in any case are weak in this country, what does it give you at the end of the day? I think it gives you bad press, and rightly so.
Right, bad press and rightly so. And in fact, L&T, Lloyd's one of the quietest companies. I mean, they do astounding work, from building temples to nuclear or ballistic missile submarines. But it's the first time that an L&T chairperson has come out, attracted so much of controversy. But what's the general trend in corporate India? Is there a consensus that we need to actually push our employees to work harder? Where is this coming from, really?
Not really, Sandeep. I think the overall trend in corporate India very clearly is recognizing the importance of work-life balance, recognizing that there is a lot of pressure. We are in a competitive workplace. In India, for every job, they say there are at least 5 other people in waiting for the job. So it is a competitive workplace. I think work pressures are high, and I think that's understandable. I think though younger people do feel strongly that there is a life outside of work. So while they want to give their best for the 9 hours, they want the promotions, they want rewards, they want bigger salaries, all the rest, they also want to have a life outside of work. And I think a lot of modern day CEOs are recognizing that. If you look at some of the very successful companies, I think they very strongly advocate a 5-day work week. They very strongly advocate that people can't encash their leave, right? There was a time 20 years ago, as Kartik mentioned, when a lot of us loved the idea of, piling on the leave and encashing it. I think that's no longer looked at as very positively. So overall, I think the trend is towards a far more healthy work-life balance. I know in the case of startups, sometimes founders tend to push people very hard. And in that, I would say it partially be overlooked. But when CEOs of large corporations say these things publicly, and these are among India's biggest, I think it's a cause for deep worry. Right? And the fact is, sooner than later, I believe markets have to look at these pronouncements far more seriously. Right? Are we looking at a company that's involved seriously in nation building, that's out to do good, that is now privately practicing a slave-driven culture? I think that, to my mind, is a big worry. And, I would say that in markets elsewhere in the world, these things would have a significant ripple. The one is yet to see what their impact is going to be. But I do believe that it's rather surprising that the CEO of, a very respectable company to L&T has kind of shot off the hip in this manner. Right.
He's shot off the hip indeed. But Kartik, what kind of damage control has the company been doing after Mr. Subrahmanyan's comments? How did they justify that? What has he said so far?
He hasn't come out and spoken, at least not until now, as you and I are having this conversation along with Lloyd. But I think even the statement that the company has released, it's a long statement, it's a page-long statement. And what it's really trying to tell you, the gist of it is that we encourage people bringing passion to the table. Right. Beyond that, the company has not specifically commented on this particular conversation that got recorded, got leaked. Just to put some facts on the table, the video is undated. So we really don't know whether this conversation took place yesterday or a week back or a month back or even earlier. It seems that it is recent enough because it's digital, it is online, it is post-COVID. So one gets to understand that it is not a very old conversation. But we don't know when this conversation really took place. But I think the point that I want to make at this point is, Sandeep, that, it's not a Gen Z who asked him that question. The designation of the person who's asking this question is vice president. If you look at the video, it is fairly clear that the person is definitely in his 40s, maybe mid-40s or so. So the challenge is not as much about a new generation of employees having a problem with working beyond 5 days a week. This question being asked, that why do you expect us to work on Saturdays, is coming from a seasoned professional. It is coming from somebody who is holding an important designation in that organization. And hence, that question being asked, apparently in a public forum, there are more people apparently on that Zoom call or whatever platform they're having this conversation on, says that there is obviously some sort of a distress in the company that a question like this gets asked.
Right.
And the manner in which, the reply comes, I mean, it is jovial, he's smiling, it seems like there is some sort of a smirk. So even if you're not serious about what you're saying, the fact that this is the top of the mind answer that you have, that I want you to work more, I want you to come 7 days a week, I want you to work on Sundays as well, it should be 90 hours. What are you going to do at home? You'll stare at your wife will stare at you. I mean, it shows that even in a jovial moment, perhaps in a light-hearted conversation, this is the top of mind response of the chairman and CEO of one of the largest infrastructure companies in the country.
Absolutely, and a company that's been involved in nation building,
and that's the second point actually, nation building, and nation building is pretty much being abused, being weaponized, whether it was Mr. Narayana Murthy, and I have a great deal of respect for Mr. Murthy, but I mean, that aside, what he has built India's IT sector among the 5 or 6 companies that were instrumental in building it, but just coaxing, motivating, encouraging, rather pushing employees to contribute to nation building by working more in a private organization, putting in more hours in a private organization, I think just defeats all logic. You're motivating somebody and adding this moral pressure, this obligation that, hey, if you don't work 90 hours a day, as 90 hours a week, 70 hours a week, you don't work 7 days a week, 6 days a week, you're not contributing to nation building. Hey, I'm still contributing because I'm paying my taxes at the end of the day.
I'm paying my taxes, exactly. And, possibly we won't be the 3rd largest economy if you don't work 90 hours a day. Is that sentiment being weaponized, Lloyd, you think, the fact that you aren't contributing to nation building if you don't work 70 or 90 hours a day? Look where the Japanese came with hard work, the Germans, of course.
It seems so, Sandeep. I mean, the kind of, with big leaders talking about this, it almost seems like it's the little kind of higher ground they're taking, saying that nation building is important. So I think that's one of the kind of ways they can assuage this whole situation. But like Kartik said, I think it is overstating, right? As a respectable corporate CEO, you have every bit of responsibility to drive output, to make sure that your teams perform well. I think that's fine. But being prescriptive about how you live your life, whether you stare at someone outside of work, I think that speaks of, to my mind, far overreach. And when large corporation CEOs say so, people who spend a lifetime in the business, forget about their salary and emoluments they draw, I think it's a cause for concern. Right? This is not some 25-something, founder, CEO who's kind of, said this in a video broadcast to his team, right? Even that is inexcusable, but one would overlook at that. This is a seasoned professional who spent a lifetime in the business, in possibly one of India's largest corporations. I think a lot of very, very worrying signals. The fact that, as Kartik said, even the PR team's long-winded note doesn't seem to suggest any kind of guilt about what he said. It's more about the fact that, yes, the nation building. I think using the nation building card to drive long hours of work is absolutely ridiculous. I think importantly, focus on output, focus on results, absolutely good. Get teams in place, be a right-sized organization. Maybe you need to get more people if you believe that not enough work is happening. But these kind of measures and by respectable business leaders is a very, very bad mark for India Inc.
It's a very, very bad mark for India Inc. Indeed, Lloyd Mathias, thanks very much for joining us. And of course, Kartik Malhotra, we are talking about how possibly nation building is being weaponized by the corporate sector as they talk about shredding the work-life balance that Indian employees enjoy, and possibly working on weekends and Sundays as well. Thank you very much for joining us.